Well, I've decided to start by interviewing both my parents instead of just one of them, because I feel like that they're both of them had a part in how I became who I am today. And I have my daddy here, Elton Long, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his life, and then we'll go to my mom, Sarah Long, and so we're going to kind of split it up into two different halves. So we're going to start out by just asking Daddy about his childhood, and first of all, would you tell us who your daddy was and what a little bit of his background was?
I don't know much about his background. He worked all his life. He come through the deep depression. Back in Depression days, long ago. It was very hard for everybody. It wasn't just one family, it was all the families about. It was hard for them to make a living. And they had to do whatever they had to do it. My daddy worked in timber all his life, and cross ties was his main source of income. Of course, there's little old cotton crops around on the hill farm that you did good if you made a bale of cotton to the acre. Daddy had to supplement his work, labor with something else. So he decided he had some good cross-tie timber. And cross-ties weren't bringing very much. But Dad decided whatever they brought it'd be that much. So he got my mama to go with him to the woods and help him cut a tree down. Didn't have a pile of saw, nothing like to work with. Just had to make do with whatever you could get. And Mother would help Daddy cut the tree down. Then he'd let her go to the house and prepare a meal for him while he cleaned up the log, blended it up, got it ready to make a tie. But little as you think, what a tie would bring back in that day was a dime, 10 cents. But they were down under some deep hills. A steep hill, and couldn't bring a load out of that. They'd go down there and cut 10 cross ties, and Daddy would hew them out with a broadaxe. Mother would school hack the log, which is making it ready to hew with broadaxe. He had put just a few, 3 or 4 ties on the little old wagon he had and haul it out underneath. Then he'd pick up one, put it on his shoulder and carry it out. He did that and he got all 10 of those ties out. And then the end of the thing, the wind up of the money deal, he'd go to town with 10 ties, which would bring $1. That he had to carry up, part of them up the hill on his shoulder. Now, some of you people might snigger and laugh at this, but it's the truth. They weren't just a few poor folks, everybody was poor. bought our groceries and carried home from the dollar. And you'd think, well, what would a dollar buy? Well, you could get a sack of flour out of a dollar. And you could get a pair of overalls for 75 cents. This is not something that I heard about, it's something I knew about. But we had a lot of love in our family. And a lot of britches worn. Dad wore your britches if you didn't do what he told you. It was a good life though. If we had more of that today, we wouldn't have the crime we got as it is. Get back to the way I started my job. We had a little old peckerwood sawmill sitting out there on the hillside, cutting cross-arms. Cross-arms is an arm that goes on top of the light pole. And by the way, lights were just in a few places. They weren't all over the country like they are now. But there was a special piece of timber. It took a special person to be able to cut it. And you had to have an inspector to inspect that piece of timber. They had to stand up to a standard before you sell it for premium price. I don't remember what the premium price was on that piece of timber. I think it's a wood. Exactly, but it was a little better than normal. Back in that day, you could buy timber, wood for $1 per 1,000. You would get labor for 75 cents a day. Pretty rough go. But anyway, loaded the truck, started out with a load of cross arm, the thing got spinning, stuck. So we just put a few tires on the other truck and carried it out there and hooked to it, and I was driving the dead truck. So we got away from there, and every time that there's a driver to be had, I was it. Everybody called me the truck driver. Just pulling it or just pulling it by itself. Then later on down the road, we had a pair of mules named Dynamite and Sam. And they said if you had a mule that would pull a truck, you had a real good pulling mule. And every time the truck got stuck thereafter, we went and got old Dynamite and Sam. And I remember seeing them pull a truck. We had a sawmill on the truck, carried it to the woods. Got out there in the woods and got stuck. Hooked old Dynamite and Sam with the truck. And they just, you could see them just scotching. His feet just go pushing down in the dirt. You wouldn't run and jerk at it or nothing. It's just a dead pull. And they could pull enormous loads that way. Now what else you want to know?
Well, when you were driving the truck, how old were you when you were driving the truck?
I'm about to pull that
You said I've
No
heard you
license.
say that you no license, and I heard you told me that you couldn't even touch the pedal hardly.
I couldn't hold up the steering wheel. I had to hold myself up there to the wheel. We got out of the stall. Of course, grown up took it and went on to the market. And later on, we got some bigger trucks, some better trucks. My daddy bought one that didn't have a cab on it. meaning nowhere to get in out of the rain or wind or cold. There was $1,000 difference in the truck that had the cab on it and one that didn't. $1,000 was a jet airplane, man. This wasn't no jet, but I don't want to say it.
Nothing special about it.
Well, it was just so much better than the ones that we had before. The trucks that we had before, you couldn't put lumber nowhere but right over the wheel. And 20-foot lumber, you had to let it come over the front wheel and go over the back wheel. That's keep from rearing up, dumping your load. And didn't have tires with air in them. Those tires that had were solid rubber tires. We had a lot of sand beds in this country, and they just wouldn't go with the sand at all. We just have to jig down. I saw my daddy unload and reload the same load 3 times one time in a sand bed. And one time he went all left, and he sitting in the sand bed, stuck. Back in the day, guys couldn't do that now. He couldn't get it out. He didn't have no help. He just walked on it. But he was a tough old nut, I tell you that. He wouldn't give up on nothing. He had 2 boys that he wouldn't give up on either. We did exactly what he said when he said it, and as much as he said. But I respect him fully. He's a fine fellow, fine person. Good to his family.
You got a brother who is how much older than you?
He's 6 years older than I.
6 years older than you, and then you got a sister that's how much younger?
8 years young.
8 years. Y'all spread out pretty good.
Yeah. But we all had a job to do around the house. Some of us got in kindling wood, some of us got in firewood, burning the fireplace. We didn't have no electric heat or no other heat than just wood burning heat. But we were raised up that way and enjoyed every minute of it. Didn't know that there was any easier way.
Now, your daddy had sawmills all his life,
Yeah.
and it was a portable mill, right?
First mill my dad ever had. He had a 1931 Model A Ford car. He traded that car for that sawmill.
You know where he got it from?
A fellow by the name of Mr. Eric Hollis. Swapped it to him. Swapped him that car. It's just a little old groundhog sawmill. Didn't have no edges, didn't have nothing. Not much power you could just pull with a full tractor, wheel tractor. But it got the job done. And back in those days, you could buy all the timber you wanted. You had to be very careful about the grade. Didn't nobody want open grain, old field pine, they call it. And they finally got to where they gonna do what it was. Old field or what have you. When World War II come on, they'd buy anything.
Now, speaking of World War II, you tell about that.
Well, I was a young boy.
Yeah, you were a little too young.
I was too young for World War II. But later on in years, my years caught up with me. And I was about to have to go in service. And I didn't want to go in the Army. So I volunteered for the Navy, which some more of my friends, brother-in-laws, and what have you. Because I didn't have no brother-in-laws then.
Future brother-in-law.
And they sent us to Great Lake, Illinois, still a naval base there now. And us off up there with half enough clothes on. Of course, wintertime had already set in up there. We
Can you
packed fruits first night.
tell about that first night? I think it's funny. About y'all, probably y'all went on a train, right?
Mm-hmm.
Left from Durant, and then when you got it, it was a one-day trip. Y'all did it all.
Yeah, day and night. It's a day and night. We got up there and unloaded, and well, we slept on the train first night. The next night we slept in the back. We didn't have nothing but just hot water heater for heat. Didn't have no blaze heat, nothing. Nice, so they did. There was no heat.
And that was in 44, 45, something.
1945.
So you got up when you got there. Tell about when y'all went into mess hall. That was the first thing y'all did.
Well,
The mashed potato.
well, it wasn't mashed potato, it's just potato,
Oh.
3 times a day. Mashed potatoes what it was.
Uh-huh.
I went to the mess hall the next day, hadn't had anything to eat several days. And I was, man, I was ready to eat. But what I didn't, I failed to do was read my signs. Right up over the door it says, take all you want, but eat all you take. Well, I didn't pay that no attention because I was hungry. I fell in there and got a plate full of stuff. And when I eat all I could eat, I couldn't eat it. It just wasn't good. No seasoning, no salt, no nothing. I went by they had a guard at the door of the mess hall. And I passed by him and he stopped me. He told me, he said, what's wrong with that food? I said, I can't eat it. He said, you can't eat it. I said, no, I'm not going to eat it. Oh, I said, you are going to eat it too. So I said, no, sir, I can't eat it. He said, you sit down right over on that bench. I sat down over there and said, now you eat that food. But I started eating, packing it in my pocket, in my shirt, and everywhere I could put it. And I didn't eat it, but he turned his head, that's when I'd go to pack it. Well, I finally overcome that. Got to where I could eat it pretty good. I see him lost, I can't.
They so y'all went through basic training there in Great Lake.
Yeah. That was a pretty tough round too. We were firefighters and gun shooters. Shooting a 30-06 rifle at 300 yards. Supposed to hit a bullseye every time. Well, I'd always hunted a little. And all through the years, my daddy was a bird hunter, and I loved bird hunting. 'Cause I was pretty young for a bird hunter, but I was a pretty good shot. So they put us in a lay down position on the stomach. And they give you a certain number of rounds of shells to shoot. Well, you shoot them. And you had a marker down there, marker man down there on in a foxhole. Every time you'd shoot, he'd put the bullseye where you hit. So I done pretty good, and I had a boy laying a brother. Fellow laying beside me, he never had been there, and they told us not to hang our chin over the stock, because the chin, that gun was so powerful when they shoot it, it bust your lip. So I took that all in. What he told me, I took it, scratched my back. Back. Oh, come over. Up. Right there. Ooh. Maybe I get by. Now, hit me on.
You were on the firing range, you said, and you'd
Oh,
kept
yeah.
and busted yourself in the mind.
Yeah. So, my sergeant, my
Drill instructor.
drill instructor reached down and grabbed some of my buddies' shells and threw them over there to me and told me to shoot these rapid fire. Now I got to shooting them, and that fellow got to marking them, and I had 7 out of 10 bullseye on rapid fire. He told the other officer, says, "We got an old coon hunter here." Scratch me over here. Down. Up this one. So my life moved on with him.
Y'all went to, where did you go after basic training? You went to
I went to
Michigan? I mean,
Farragut, Idaho. Then the war was ended, and they was trying to get us all back home or get us well enough to go home. Do it to me, John. Well, that's fine. And I had some bad teeth, and they wanted to fix my teeth growing on. Well, they called us dental holdovers. I went to the dentist's office. He put a thing in my mouth, and it was a screw. He opened out just wide he wanted. And I sat there 4 hours. He'll ever tooth I had. I didn't have no cavities that I know of, but he filled every tooth I had before they turned my mouth. Turned loose, I couldn't hardly close. So we meandered along there, got my teeth kind of fixed up. And they told me one day, said, "We're gonna let you go home." I said, "What's the matter?" Well, I said, "You're not physically fit, and the war's over. We're gonna let you go home." Well, that didn't suit me too well, because there wasn't nobody at home. All the young fellows were young. But I had a little old girl at home. Thought the world up. come on home. Me and her broke up. And started going with my wife now. I've been with her. After 17 years of marriage, we had 2 children.
But y'all were in, before that, y'all got married in 1950, right? And then, how long was it from then that y'all, what'd y'all do after you got married, as far as work related?
Well, we sawmill and fiddled around here long as we could. And I heard about some hauling. I had a couple of trucks. Some hauling in Florida, in Orangeburg. They paying a fantastic price down there. Orange hauling. So I went over there, me and 2 more fellas went over there in the pickup truck. We got over that, wasn't near nothing like what they said it was.
Y'all drove from Sturgis to,
Yeah,
to where?
but I stopped at Miami, Florida.
Oh my goodness.
So we decided we better come back home and try to do something here. So we come back here. God dang. Down there. That's down my back. Up. When we come back here and start our meal back up, then I heard that there was a big fire come through Florida, or Georgia, brother. So I decided to investigate that, and I did, and I made a trade with a fellow over there. Had some timber pole in the woods, and I decided I'd go over there and cut it. Traded with him, come over and cut it. So there was another problem. No labor. Nobody won't go away from home to work. So that kind of, I went over there and stayed 5 years, but it didn't never pan out really.
It was hard time.
Hard times, you couldn't get no help, you couldn't, people that would work, I mean, that you could work, wouldn't work.
And but when you went over there, you loaded up everything,
Everything I had. on
meal
2
and
trucks.
everything,
Meal, blacks and all.
on how many trucks?
I had 3. I just had 2 of my own. Another fellow, he carried a truck. But we made it. I mean, we didn't get rich or nothing like that, but we stayed over there 5 years and come back home. I bought a bulldozer, went in the bulldozer business. Stayed in the business 20-something years. More people got in the dozer business after thinking I was making all the money. First thing you know, there's several dozers around. But I stayed in the dozer business 20 odd years. I didn't get rich, but I made a good living for my family. Had my children, sent them to private schools, educated them in private schools,
And you
sent both of them to college. They got 4 years of college to pay.
you did that when you were doing the bulldozer work, what kind of work were you doing as far as just dirt work?
I'm building little old government fish ponds and clearing land. And clearing right away from roads. Constructing roads.
And you stayed in that until you started work over at the plant building. Or did you work any other job in between?
Oh yeah, I saw a mill down in where Bud Road and enjoyed it. But I had two doors, two complete outfits, cutting blade, piling blade, rake, and everything. We done that on burning. We got through with it, ready for the plow. I bought a big old bit, and it cut a stump, a 4-inch tree stump off, just kick it out of the ground. So I developed asthma. My doctor told me to get out off that nose, get out of that smoke, dust and stuff. So I got out of that, and well, I had a planter mill. There was a town over here called Reform, Mississippi. And he got in contact with me through another sawmill man. And he hired me to manage his business. And I went there and stayed there till I retired 25 years ago.
Now, when you worked there, and then while you were working at Plain Mills, you started kind of getting back into pulpwood business, didn't you?
No.
A little bit. How did you get back into the logging after?
I was working at the mill in the daytime, and I was working some of my crew at night, cutting and hauling logs and pulpwood. But I got back in the timber business and stayed in it till just a few years ago. That's plenty, man. That's dog bait.
That was, I remember you using Aunt Josie's tractor before we even had a skip. And you eventually, and had one power saw.
I bought a skip and bought a power saw and a knuckle boom. Just make climax every now.
And you wound up, you quit logging in what, 92, 93, I guess?
Won't know what year it was.
Somewhere, I think it was somewhere along there, 'cause well, I thank you for your, telling your story. And, now we're gonna go to, the other side, hear the other side of the story from Mama.
The mother's side of the story.
Maybe it won't be too much different from yours. It may be her version of the truth. Anyway, we'll be back with her in just a few minutes.
Play it back.
Well, we're back, and this time I've got my mama, Sarah Long, and she's going to do the other half of the video and tell us a little bit about her life and where she came from and some of the things that kind of shaped her life. So I guess we'll start from the beginning, Mom. What you were born when? You're not supposed to ask a lady how old she was.
That's right. I was born in 1932 in Morgantown community, just south of Sturgis. Everything at that time that lived in Morgantown was Morgan. My great-grandfather came to Octop Community, and he was a bound boy. And after he,
He's the one that lived at the Cedars, wasn't he?
yeah, I couldn't think of the family, the prominent Octop family, but it leaves me right now. But in the later years, when he got older, he went to Morgantown, and there he had established his family. He had 5 sons and 2 daughters, and that's again everything down there with Morgan. So my mother was Morgan. In Sturgis, the Jacksons are fairly well known. There's a lot of Jacksons in Sturgis. So the Jacksons and Morgans, they are my family. And when I was mail carrier in Starkville, but asked me where I was from and who I was, and I said, I was a Jackson. He said, well, you ken to everything in Sturgis then, and that's about the truth. But of course, we're small and close-knit community. After I was born in Morgantown, we moved to Craig Springs, and we lived down there till I was 13 years old, and then moved to Sturgis. School in Sturgis. Went to school at Craig Springs Community School, which was a country school. We had 3 rooms in the school, and later on the government established a lunchroom, which was during World War II, and we were privileged to have the lunchroom as opposed to having to carry a brown paper sack every day. So that was certainly a treat. We had 3 classes in some of the rooms, and we had what we called the primary, and then the 1 and 2 grades, and then we had, I can just see the little 4-room school. We had a stage and a piano that was very, very obsolete, and I'm sure it hadn't been tuned in hundreds of years. But anyway, to make a long story short, I went there till I was in 7th grade. They consolidated with Sturgis and Longview, so they did away with our school, which we dearly loved. We loved a close-knit relationship with our teachers. They had come to Craig Springs and board, and they came from West Point. One of our teachers from West Point, one from Cumberland. Of course, to us, oh, I'm closing my eyes. That was like a foreign country to us, and of course I know that's hard for you to understand, but probably was 3 cars in Craig Springs at the time I lived there. There was a few more in Sturgis when we moved to Sturgis. I went to school up here and graduated in 1950. Didn't hardly get out of school until I got married, very young age, which is not something people do now. They're fortunate enough to be able to go on to college. We were not poor people, but we didn't. We had no way of knowing that that you could go to school if you knew how to go about it. But now everybody knows that you just apply, you get government help, or mom and dad is able to help you. You apply yourself and do that. But anyway, I was married young, 17 years old, married. We moved, Elson's already told you how we moved around, and I was never been one to be away from my family. I was close to my family. I love, and we still are a close family. But anyway, that was hard on me to live up, so to speak, in the country, even though it was just 2 miles away. I was not used to not having a crowd of people drop in and laugh and talk. I had a very cheerful family, and everybody would come there and just eat and talk and laugh and make a lot of jokes. And we'd even sing. We sang around, mother played piano and all this kind of foolishness that I was accustomed to, so therefore it was hard on me to be a young girl stuck off in the country. So, but anyway, we moved around with the sawmill crew. I adjusted fairly well. And, well, I guess I'm not even better than fairly well. I'm pretty tough. So I won't say that it was just fair adjustment. Then we went through the trials and tribulations that most new married couples experience. We were married 17 years before we had Laura. Of course, she was absolutely our pride and joy, and still is. But then who would know that we'd have John 5 years later, and he would really be the exceptional one. I see the smile on his face, but I think he knows. We have a special relationship. I know that happens to most mothers and sons, but especially since I've just recently experienced some health problems, he has really been my rock. And one of my friends came by the other day and said, "Aren't you glad you had those two?" She was implying that I'm glad you had them now that you're sick. And I said, "Oh, I've always been glad I had them." So anyway, we went through the education, the process of educating them. And we're older parents, but I put forth the effort not to drag them down with our age, not to be involved, and I wanted to be involved in everything that they were involved in. I tried to participate and be helpful to them, not pushy, just to be. I tried to maintain a cheerfulness for them as opposed to dragging them down, letting them dread coming home. That was not, because that's what I experienced as a child. That was an influence in my life that I tried to pass on to my children in our home life. We active in church. They never questioned that we were going to church. Why are we going? Are we going? Do we have to go? They just knew. It was just something that we did. They enjoyed it. They still go. They still, it's not a matter of, Mama's not there to make us go. They have been very involved in their church life, and that I'm thankful for. That, to me, is probably one of my proudest accomplishments. That my children are both professing Christians, and they live like they're professing Jesus Christ as their Savior. And I don't know that I'm supposed to mention Christianity, but I'm not ashamed of it. So let's don't throw out the page. Let's don't throw out my boy in class, because I got to preach it. But anyway, I know that again, you can tell I'm a proud mama of my son and daughter. No grandchildren, but let's see now what we want to talk about. Okay, my years as a
child.
Let's
talk about, like, what do you feel like your, what are some things that stand out in your mind as far as, maybe what's your earliest childhood memory for one thing? What do you remember the first?
My earliest childhood memory was my grandfather, Morgan. Mother was, I remember he was sitting on the back steps. I had a long back porch, kept a wash pan and a dipper and a bucket and a soap and the towel. You never used a good towel except on Sunday. The hand towel every day was a fertilizer sack, bleached out fertilizer sack. I remember Mother washing Papa's feet, 'cause he was fat. He was a fat man, like me. I know John laughed. He thought, "Hey, Mama, is that where you got it?" But Papa was sitting there in his overalls, and I thought, well, how sweet of her to get down and wash her daddy's feet. That was one of my first memories. Then another memory of him was we were sitting on his lap, two of us, one grandson and one granddaughter, and he picking out pecans and letting us eat pecans. And I remember his death a few months later that died of pneumonia, and that's just something else I don't pronounce too well, but anyway. And it was not an old man. See, back then, we all, when you're little and young, everybody's an old man, but he actually was not an old
How
man.
old was he?
And I would, I could think about it until he was in his 60s. But then his wife, and he had a daughter that lived there on the home place, and she was hard of hearing, and because of a hearing problem caused by high fever when she was a baby, she was not able to speak well. But she stayed there with Mama all of her life and never went anywhere. But anyway, I look back now and it must have been extremely, extremely difficult. There was no kind of Social Security, not anything for income. I always think, well, how in the world did they manage? But then we moved to Craig Springs, across the woods, so to speak, probably 4 miles across through the country, through the back. And there we lived, and I said till I was in 7th grade, moved to Sturgis in 8th grade. But those were very, very happy times. That was during World War II, and that was impressionable years because there was no newspapers, and there was a radio, but no television, of course. There were, when I say no newspapers, country people didn't get newspapers delivered, and you didn't go up to the station and pick up one. But at that time, there were soldiers from Columbus that had stationed at Mississippi State College that came up there and were trained. They were trained out at Bryan Field. You'd see them flying over Craig Springs community, and you'd see gliders. And when you'd go to town on Saturday afternoon, the streets of Starkville were filled with soldiers with a girl on their arm, and to a little fat 10-year-old girl, it was the most romantic, exciting thing that you could ever see, with these soldiers with wings on their breasts and their cocky hats on, and the girlfriend on the arm. So that was impressionable years to me. We even, some of the club ladies from Craig Springs entertained at the U.S. or we furnished refreshments, and Mother let me go with them. And Lord, I thought I died and gone on with a soldier from Wisconsin talking to me. Now mind you, I wasn't 10 years old, so it was, I still like the World War II movies that's in the music of that era. So anyway, that's part of life. And then we move on, and we go to Sturgis, and we cheerlead, and we play basketball, and even in the 40s, we didn't have a gymnasium in Sturgis, so we played on dirt court. And then the last year I went to play basketball, we would go at lunchtime all the way to Longview, which is probably 5 or 6 miles from Sturgis, and we'd practice on their court because their school had moved to Starkville, so we had access to the county gymnasium there, but we weren't the big winners. You can imagine, we didn't get much practice time in because you had to get back to next class. But oh, I loved school. I never said, oh, I hate to go to school, because I'll hate to admit it wasn't for the learning experiences, it was the socializing that I enjoyed more than anything. It was not something I dreaded. Of course, I think we all look back and say, hey, I should have applied myself. But, how that goes, it's easier to see. Hindsight's better than foresight, but then, again, that's it. Graduated, went to Memphis and worked a short time for International Harvest. That's who it was. But then I first went to work on the department store. Of course, that, again, was
First time away from home.
get a little bit, freedom you think you guys made. You really on the spot when you really know how to handle it. It didn't take me long to get on sick with Sturgis.
How many of y'all were staying up there? Because it was like several of y'all in the room.
Well, there was actually 3 of us. And all 3 of us came home and got married. It was easier trying to find a job to make a living than oh, I hope they don't hear this. Excuse me.
That's one.
But anyway, no, it's fine. I guess that about brings us up to, see, I'm trying to, I pushed the kids in there first, when actually they didn't come to 17 years later.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
But
you
that's
know,
okay. I
You
mean,
get the
we're-
drift of what's happened, and
So y'all stayed up in Memphis for how long? Y'all?
just months, just nothing.
Not long.
No.
And then you came back to Sturgis, and that was probably pretty close to 49, 50.
At 50, I graduated at 50, and married at 50, so actually it was no time.
Mm.
If you do your math, it's just, it's not even enough to say. The water got hot in Memphis, you just say that, so you read into your smoke coming home. But that was the thing to do then. You left home and found a job in the city. Most people stayed longer than I did, but anyway, that's about it.
So you came back and y'all got married in 1950.
Yeah, we did. And like I said, our friends, they were young, they married, and they having the same experiences we were. This to me, like I said, hindsight is so much better. I think this is the reason that I've always, since y'all were growing up, school age and all this, I wanted so much for you to have an education. I don't know why it was so important to me to be independent and to be educated. Because I made a good living. I was fortunate. I was very fortunate to work for the federal government, and you couldn't beat the job because I dearly loved my job. And the retirement's good, the benefits were good, but see, I still think that's what I wanted, y'all. I think that's what most parents do. They want better for their children, and they're really willing to sacrifice. My mother and dad loved me just as much as I love y'all. But I don't think at that time, they were young parents. My mother was just 51 when she died, so, but you have to have that maturity to say, hey, we're gonna make arrangements, we're gonna go thus and so you'll be able to go to school. There was one person in my graduating class of 30-something that went to college. And that, what everybody goes now.
Right.
And I keep harping on that, and I know I am, but anyway,
so y'all got married, and then where did how long before after y'all got married did y'all move to Georgia?
And, probably probably 3 years, 2.5, 3 years.
So you were like
Gosh.
20 or
Yeah, just a kid.
and
I've been
even
there.
further away from home than that.
Yeah. Oh Lord, yes. I was hot and it's horrible. Mosquitoes horrible. No conveniences. I mean, if you've never lived in a sawmill camp, or actually it was a turpentine camp. There's abandoned turpentine camp, so you hadn't been there and done that, and you hadn't cooked on a wood stove, and to see how far we've come, this is what I was thinking, even as yesterday. In 53 years, how far we've come from where we started. I mean, it's just, to have all the modern conveniences and air conditioning and vehicles that we have, and of course I'm humbled by it and I'm appreciative of it. This is not a boastful statement at all. It's just that I've been there and done that. I know about cooking on a wood stove. I know about washing on a rub board. I know about drawing water out of a well. I know about carrying water from a well. So, anyway.
But
You know the statement, when the Virginians live, we've come a long way, David. Anyway, talk some more, ask me something.
well,
What did you find it most interesting?
Well, how many meal hands did you have to cook for? Over there. I don't reckon how many.
Well, we didn't cook, I didn't cook for all the meal hands, but the men that we were closer to than just the general meal. I probably cooked 3 or 4, plus your dad and me and Mr. Long, so that's a pretty good crew for a 20-something-year-old woman. I didn't even think I was a woman. I just thought I was a kid, and I still. But anyway, it's mind-boggling.
I think was so neat. I think it was 87. I think it was 87 that we went back to where to Halo, where y'all live, and visited all those old places and just saw it all. And I hope I never forget this. We drove up in, what's her name?
Miss Sue,
And him. They both were
Mr.
there.
Winston.
Yeah, which were their next door neighbors when they lived at this turpentine camp. And they were older than Mom and Dad.
Oh, yeah.
And both of them were sitting on the porch. And it's probably been 40 years since y'all
Oh,
lived?
yeah.
And pulled up in the car, both of them sitting on the front porch in rocking chairs that were my granddaddy's, I think. I think there's some story behind the rocking chair. But anyway, Mama got out of the car and says, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, do you know who I am? And immediately no question at all, first thing out of her mouth was, she says, yes, y'all were that couple that lives right over there.
Oh.
And I thought that impressed me on me, And of course we visited some more people over there that knew y'all, but that was pretty impressionable on me, because I couldn't believe of how remote it was. I mean, Sturgis is kind of remote, I guess, to some people, but Halo is really.
Echoes County in South Georgia, and it at the end of the line. It's the smallest, probably the smallest county in Georgia, and very timber country. And it used to be the turpentine, big turpentine business, but That was a dropping off place, and the reason we went was because the fire had swept through the timber, and they wanted to harvest the timber before it burned. So anyway, I tell you, that was one. It's just a desperate attempt. It takes a young person to do that. An older person would say, "Hey, I'm not tackling that." But anyway, a younger person would try it, and your daddy was one. He tried to make a honest living and provide, and he did. He's done a good job. So I wasn't going to complain and not go and stay home because he needed somebody to help. So anyway, that's it.
So y'all stayed over there 5 years.
Well, approximately, yeah, yeah. And we were sad. I was sad to leave because I wasn't sad to leave Turpentine County. We moved on up a little bit and we got a better house, and we live in Statenville. And Elf's sister came over there and taught school. The circumstances were better for us.
A little bit more familiarity.
Very
a little bit more
familiar.
roots.
Had friends. Had friends. They were different people, even though it's just 2 states over. They're different people than they are in Mississippi. I don't think at that time, they were not as progressive, and I don't know, it just seemed that way to me. But I did miss them when I left. And a lot of our friends had died even in '87 when we went back, so.
Oh, the friends y'all went over there, from Waynesboro,
Yeah, they both died. They came back to Mississippi, Waynesboro.
So I remember them.
Yeah. And she taught school there in Waynesboro. They both died.
They were real nice.
They were older than us, but we enjoyed them. We always were comfortable with older people. So, anyway, that's the story of George.
So y'all came back after being over there about 5 years, and then what did you do? Daddy got into bulldozer business. I mean, I know he stayed in
Yeah.
sawmill business.
He
for a
still
little
was
while.
in the sawmill business. Sure did. Daddy never did. He wasn't one to pick his job. He was really talented as far as the logging business or bulldozer business. So he never sat around and said, "Hey,
What
I'm
can
not.
I do?"
What can I do?" He always went to a job. Always had a job. And so for me to say, but he was a good sawyer, and he sawed for different sawmills before he went into bulldozer business, and because of health reasons, he had to leave that and go into the plain mill business. But he's most of the time he's never been satisfied with the status quo, just a salary. And so he wants to supplement his
Something on top of what he
something.
was doing.
Always had to do that. On the other hand, was satisfied with status quo. But I was fortunate that I was able to stay home with y'all when you were young. You were excited to come home. Mama would be at home with Kool-Aid, cookies. I know that I remarked one time that I never heard y'all say what kind of clothes you wore or what kind of shoes you had on, or after you were old enough to have a car. You never bragged on having those things, but you have talked about Mama being home with something to eat when you got home from school. So that made me know what's the important thing to a child is if it can happen, that's a good thing to happen. It should be able to come home and Mama be back.
I think it did. I think it done a lot. Because, I mean, you were all, it was like, if we needed you, we didn't have to hunt you up or anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But anyway, you had your first child in 1967.
That's right.
And it was 17 years after being married, getting up in years. Of
That's
course, I
right.
can't talk too much.
Well, I was 34 when Laura was born, just a fraction under 40 when you were born. Daddy was 40 years older than Laura and 45 years older than you. Of course, that's, but I don't like to look at that as being bad because we had been there and done our thing, so to speak. Not that we had the wildlife, I don't mean that, but it never did cramp our style to be home with y'all or take you with us on vacation, take you wherever we went. And that doesn't mean I didn't turn you loose. I was smothered, never have been that, but I certainly enjoyed having my family.
What, now, of course, I know that you worked a little bit as, at the town hall
Oh,
clerk.
yeah.
As I was a child, and I know time and time again you would, substitute mail carrier here in Sturgis. And,
Got my experiences at town hall.
yeah,
Yeah, that was a good experience. You like to go with me
yeah.
on occasions and type. And I have been an alderman, in fact, I'm an alderman and vice mayor on 3 terms. So anyway, that's an experience for me.
But you're, for the most part, like you said, you were stay at home.
Oh, stay at home. But when I was working at, most of the time, at the town clerk, y'all were in school and I would go to work. And then it was just half-day job, so there was no time that, and Mama was always available if I needed you.
For mail carrier, when you said
Well,
mail
yeah,
carrier.
yeah, that's right.
What about, moving ahead just a little bit, after we got out of school, well, right before we got out of school.
I'm sorry, I really jumped on that one, John. You said moving the head. I turned my head around.
Moving, yeah.
I thought you thought moving ahead. Okay, after you got out of
Not
school.
moving your head, moving your
Okay,
head.
ahead.
You went to, you started work at the post office in Starkville in '86. So it was right after Laura graduated from high school. Right? So you
Well,
started,
I
I
don't-
think so, I think it was. It was
I
before Uncle Gerald died, right?
Yeah, it was 45.
But he died in '87, I
Okay.
think, or '80.
We were up, I don't, just, it's like when doctor asked me when you had your operation. I can't remember. It's
Right.
over. So,
But it's somewhere along
yeah,
there.
it was in the 80s.
So you started working at Starkville Post Office when you were pretty good bit older, weren't you?
Yes, I was definitely older.
60 maybe?
No, not 50, 60, 50 something. 52, I believe I was.
And so you worked there and enjoyed that, I know, because I heard you.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I really did. That was the most satisfying work I've ever done. It's a mental job, and they're definitely a physical job. But I liked it.
I think that, watching, of course, watching Daddy in my earlier years, and of course, he was working hard when you worked at the post office. But then to see you do that later in years, to work that hard, and I really think that you and him both have instilled a really good work ethic in me because of that. Because when y'all went to do something, it seemed like both of y'all really put your heart into it. It's like I remember you working for the post office. You loved working for the post office. You put your all into it, and that really made an impression on me by doing that. And I know that I feel like that's the way you felt about the job, didn't
I
you?
did feel about, and I felt, now, you know, cozy and warm and all, you know, if they could only sleep late, but I said, they never say, hey, I wanna hang on to this bed, they get up, and I never thought that you had observed that. And what we knew we had to do, okay, the clock said at 5 o'clock, I
Gotta get
don't
it
lay
done.
here and moan about it, I can turn the clock off and get up and do what I have to do. And this I find interesting in both you and Laura. You just do what you have to do, and I never thought about it coming from us, but I'll take credit. I'll take it.
Can't give Daddy all.
No, I'm gonna give Daddy
Oh,
credit,
give
and I'm
him a
gonna
little-
take some for myself.
Okay. So you retired from
Yeah, retired.
in what year was that? I can't remember either.
In 97, I think,
And that you were back at home then, and
yeah.
from
And I did want to retire, but for health reasons, because I'm not drawing, I don't mean that I'm drawing disability, I'd retired on my own, but, I didn't really want to retire, but I've gotten, I just needed to for the health reasons. But anyway, I adjusted to that real well and enjoyed it.
now coming from your point of view as far as your life, what stands out in your mind the most, barring the birth of your children? What stands out in your mind is one of the things that, historical or otherwise, what was the thing that stands out in your mind as like one of the biggest events that you can remember out of your life? Is that you went from seeing electricity in a
Yeah.
home.
Electricity, water, telephone,
That's just
all of
hard
these,
to
see,
do.
and absolutely no television, and it was so exciting. We were out in the schoolyard, and Mother got a ride to start, but we had something probably would have made it start, well, not all the time. I was a child, we didn't have any kind of vehicle, but anyway, we said, oh, Mother's going to start, going to buy some Christmas lights. Now, I know that sounds silly. Y'all can go, we can go, and I do, buy them by dozens now at Walmart, a strand of Christmas lights. And I still have them.
No,
And anyway, that was exciting, and then the event of one or two people that have a radio in the community, and you go over there, their house on Saturday night, listen to the Grand Ole Opry. Not every Saturday night, but on occasions. And now, how many televisions do we have? How many radios? But anyway, and I remember when she went to town to Western Auto and bought our first radio. And we'd come in from we'd go milk cows, and we'd hurry, we'd hurry to get back to the house to hear the Lone Ranger.
Mm.
So, anyway, you asking me what I remember most.
Yeah, what was the most you
And
think?
I jump off on reminiscing?
No.
Of course, I said that World War II was most impressive. And if you saw a movie about World War II, like State Theater and saw that, oh Lord, you could relive that honestly for weeks. Because it was, what if you, all of you see Pearl Harbor, and I remember when Pearl Harbor was attacked. My cousin from Morgantown had spent the night with us. She said, oh, reckon we'll have to, we can stay, the mules will get out. And that's how they came, with the mules and wagons. The mules would get out, we would get to spend the night again. But we vividly do I remember. Just like I remember when President Roosevelt died. My mother stood at the refrigerator and cried. And the radio was sitting on top of the refrigerator. she wasn't looking at the refrigerator and crying, it was just that that's where the radio was. But see, these things stick out in your mind, but probably the thing that made me what I am, whatever small contribution I might have made, has been my childhood upbringing, which was very stable. It was not one of those
Yeah.
chaotic, that's right. It was not like we knew Mom and Dad's gonna be at home when night came. We were provided for eating and clothing and happiness. A smile, happy home. So I guess and that means a lot to me.
Me too.
John laughed at.
No, I agree.
But anyway, is that what you want me to say? You want me to
Yeah, I
say,
think-
you want to ask something
Well,
else?
let me ask you.
Now, I
this.
can't make
what
anything.
do you think the most? What do you think? Because as fewer and fewer people can say that they've gone through a big. Of course, we've gone through, I guess, a technological
Yes,
sweep in my
Uh-huh.
lifetime. But
You have.
what do you think? What has amazed you the most as far as technology in your life? That you've seen, that you know. Now it doesn't have to be a computer or a telephone. I mean, it can be something else that happened earlier. You know, that we considered
Well,
earlier.
Can't say it amazed me more, but I enjoyed the television.
And that's
It
amazed
hasn't
you.
amazed me, and being able to talk across, and all of that and the communication. But I accept it. I don't pick it to do. I just say, hey,
This is
we're
what's
fortunate.
now.
This is what's now as far as comparing it to what was and what is. Because even when you talk to even your kids about what was, it's hard to understand. You hadn't been there, you can't tell it like it is. And it'll soon roll off, your back. It kind of turn you off with it. That's why I'd rather live in today. And I hope
I hear about it.
I hope I keep that attitude. I don't want to go backwards. I don't want any of the old days. Guys, I love electricity. I love air conditioning. So,
But there's some part
oh, it's
When you
wonderful.
look back.
Oh, it's wonderful. But yes, I do. And it's all good. Going to my mom's house and sitting on the porch and being fanned and put to bed and all that. It's good. And hearing the jar flies, we call them jar flies. Y'all may have another name for them, but and you could hear all the stillness
I
of the
love
whole community. No lights, no night lights, no none of that. Just sit on the porch with the swing creaking and a rocker, just making soft sound on the porch. Now I will look back on that part of my life and reminisce, but as far as missing in the hard stuff, I don't miss that. Oh,
Well, I appreciate you doing it. It's been fun. And like I said before, I think there's no way that I could have done just one parent and have been satisfied with it, because both of them had such a big influence on my life as far as how I've gone about my life as well. My family we're very close. We're a very tight knit family, and a lot of times you don't see that today. Of course, there's not anything wrong with that, but I love the relationship I have with my parents and other relatives. Which, that's the one thing that I can say that they've given me that that no one can take away from me is the thing, the memories that I have with them. I hope that I'll never forget them, barring illness or any other thing that I'll never forget the good times that we've had. And sometimes we've been told, sometimes we hadn't had it as easy health wise and things like that, but I have really thoroughly enjoyed them and what they meant to me and my life that I've lived. Okay, we're through.
We have,